Detective Sarah Martinez had faced down armed criminals, domestic violence calls, and hostage situations during her 12 years with the Metro Police SWAT team. Nothing had prepared her for the phone call that would change everything. Mrs. Martinez, this is Principal Andrews from Riverside Elementary. There's been an incident with Tommy. Sarah's blood ran cold. Tommy, her 8-year-old son with cerebral palsy, attended Riverside's special needs program. She had specifically chosen this school for its reputation with disabled children and its promise of individualized care. What kind of incident? Sarah asked, already reaching for her keys. Well, it seems there was a misunderstanding with his substitute teacher, Ms. Chen. Tommy had an episode during lunch and— What do you mean, an episode? Sarah's voice sharpened. Tommy's cerebral palsy occasionally caused involuntary movements and difficulty swallowing, but his regular teacher, Mrs. Peterson, knew exactly how to handle these situations. Ms. Chen thought he was choking and, well, she performed some kind of intervention that left him quite distressed. He's asking for you. Sarah was already in her car, sirens blaring in her mind, even though she drove her personal vehicle. 20 minutes later, she burst through the school's front doors, her detective instincts on high alert. Something in Principal Andrews' tone had been wrong, too careful, too measured. She found Tommy in the nurse's office, tears streaming down his face, his small body trembling. Red marks circled his throat. "Mommy," he whispered, his speech more labored than usual. "She hurt me," she said. "I was faking." Sarah's vision tunneled. In her years of law enforcement, she had developed an ironclad control over her emotions. That control cracked like ice under pressure. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said to the nurse, her voice deadly calm. The nurse, clearly uncomfortable, explained that the substitute teacher had witnessed Tommy's difficulty swallowing during lunch. Instead of following the detailed care plan in his file, Ms. Chen had grabbed Tommy by the throat, attempting to dislodge what she assumed was food. When Tommy's involuntary movements continued, she had shaken him and accused him of acting out for attention. "Where is this substitute now?" Sarah asked. "She's in classroom 4B, finishing out the day. Mrs. Martinez, I should mention that Ms. Chen has been vocal about her opinions regarding special needs students. She's made some comments about how these children should be in separate facilities." The nurse's words hit Sarah like physical blows. Someone had not only physically harmed her vulnerable child, but had done so out of ignorance and prejudice. Sarah knelt beside Tommy's chair, gently checking the marks on his neck while rage built in her chest like a controlled explosion. Her son, who faced daily challenges with courage that humbled hardened criminals, had been attacked by the very person meant to protect him. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "Mommy's here now." But it wasn't okay. As she held Tommy close, Sarah felt something shift inside her, a line crossed that could never be uncrossed. The woman who had hurt her son was still in that classroom, still around other vulnerable children. Sarah Martinez had spent years learning to be precise, methodical, and overwhelmingly effective when neutralizing threats. She was about to put those skills to very personal use. Sarah's hands didn't shake as she filled out the incident report with the school nurse. Years of tactical training had taught her to compartmentalize, channel fury into focus, transform rage into razor-sharp precision. But beneath her professional exterior, a mother's protective instincts were calculating every angle. "I need to speak with Ms. Chen," she told Principal Andrews when he returned to check on them. "Mrs. Martinez, I understand you're upset, but perhaps we should schedule a meeting tomorrow when—" "Now." The single word carried the weight of a SWAT commander's authority. Principal Andrews fidgeted with his tie. "Of course. I'll escort you to her classroom." Sarah arranged for Tommy to stay with the nurse, promising she'd return shortly. As she walked down the hallway, her tactical mind cataloged details: exit routes, potential witnesses, the layout of classroom 4B, old habits from high-stakes operations, now applied to an elementary school confrontation. Ms. Chen was a thin woman in her 50s, standing at the whiteboard as third graders worked quietly at their desks. She turned when Principal Andrews knocked, her expression shifting from mild annoyance to visible discomfort when she saw Sarah's badge clipped to her belt. "Ms. Chen, this is Mrs. Martinez, Tommy's mother. She'd like a word." The substitute teacher's jaw tightened. "I hope you're here to discuss your son's behavioral issues." That child was clearly seeking attention with his theatrics. Sarah felt her pulse steady into the familiar rhythm she experienced before breaching a hostile location. Every muscle in her body coiled with controlled tension. "Step outside," Sarah said quietly. "I'm in the middle of teaching." "Step outside." Something in Sarah's tone made the woman comply. They moved into the empty hallway, Principal Andrews trailing nervously behind. "You put your hands on my son," Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying lethal intent. "You grabbed him by the throat and shook him. That child was disrupting the entire cafeteria with his performance." Ms. Chen snapped. I've been teaching for 23 years and I know manipulation when I see it. Sarah stepped closer, using her height advantage the way she would intimidate suspects. Performance? My son has cerebral palsy. His medical information was in his file, information you clearly didn't bother to read. These special needs children are coddled. They learn to exploit their conditions for attention. The words hung in the air like a lit fuse. Sarah felt something cold and dangerous unfurl in her chest. In that moment, Ms. Chen wasn't just a misguided teacher. She was a threat to Sarah's child and potentially others. You assaulted an 8-year-old disabled child because you couldn't be bothered to read his care plan, Sarah said, her voice taking on the mechanical precision she used during tactical briefings. You left marks on his throat. You traumatized him. And you're standing here defending it. Ms. Chen's face flushed. I don't have to listen to accusations from some. Some what? Sarah interrupted, stepping even closer. She could see the exact moment the substitute teacher registered the controlled violence in her posture, the predatory stillness that came from years of cornering dangerous people. Principal Andrews cleared his throat. Ladies, perhaps we should. Call the police, Sarah said without breaking eye contact with Ms. Chen. I want to file assault charges. That's ridiculous. Ms. Chen sputtered. I was trying to help. Help. Sarah's laugh was devoid of humor. You put your hands around my child's throat and called his disability a performance. In my world, we have a term for adults who hurt vulnerable children. The substitute teacher seemed to shrink under Sarah's stare. For the first time, uncertainty crept into her voice. You can't threaten me. I'll report you to the school board. Sarah smiled then, a cold, calculating expression that had made hardened criminals reconsider their life choices. Threaten you? I haven't threatened you yet. The hallway fell silent except for the distant sounds of children in classrooms. Principal Andrews looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor tiles. But here's what's going to happen, Sarah continued, her voice dropping to the lethal whisper she used during hostage negotiations. You're going to resign from this position. Today, you're going to stay away from children, all children, until you get professional help for whatever makes you think hurting disabled kids is acceptable. You can't make me. And if I ever hear about you working with vulnerable children again, if I ever discover you've put your hands on another disabled child. Sarah let the sentence hang unfinished, but the threat was crystal clear. Ms. Chen's face had gone pale. She glanced at Principal Andrews, seeking support, but found none. Sarah turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Ms. Chen? I'm not just Tommy's mother. I'm Detective Martinez, Metro Police SWAT Division. I specialize in neutralizing threats to public safety. She didn't mean to say more. The message was delivered with the precision of a tactical strike. That evening, Sarah tucked Tommy into bed with extra care, her heart breaking as he flinched slightly when she adjusted his blankets. The red marks on his throat had darkened into bruises, photographic evidence she had meticulously documented with her phone. Will the mean lady come back tomorrow? Tommy asked, his voice small and uncertain. No, baby. She won't be coming back at all, Sarah promised, smoothing his hair. Mrs. Peterson will be there when you get back to school. After Tommy fell asleep, Sarah retreated to her home office, a converted bedroom that served as her personal command center. The walls were lined with commendations, tactical certifications, and photos from successful operations. Tonight, those skills would serve a different mission. She opened her laptop and began what she did best, investigating threats. A simple Google search revealed Ms. Chen's full name, Linda Chen, substitute teacher with the district for 3 years. But Sarah's access to law enforcement databases revealed much more. 2 previous complaints filed against Chen at other schools, both involving overly aggressive discipline with special needs students. Both complaints had been quietly resolved with transfers rather than termination. Sarah's jaw tightened. The system had failed to protect vulnerable children, shuffling a problem from school to school rather than addressing it. Her phone buzzed with a text from her partner, Detective Mike Rodriguez. Heard about Tommy. How's he doing? Physically okay. Emotionally traumatized. The teacher who did it has a history. Want me to run a background check? Sarah hesitated. Using official resources for personal matters crossed ethical lines. But then she thought of Tommy's tears, the fear in his voice, the way he flinched at her touch. Already on it. Thanks, though. She did meet official channels. Her years in law enforcement had taught her how to navigate information networks through legitimate means. Public records, social media, professional licensing boards, all accessible to a determined investigator. By midnight, Sarah had constructed a detailed profile. Linda Chen had been dismissed from 2 previous districts before arriving at Tommy's school. One incident involved restraining a student with autism until he went himself. Another involved confiscating a diabetic child's medical supplies, claiming the student was seeking attention. Most disturbing was a social media post from 6 months ago. These special needs kids are draining resources from normal children. Parents need to stop expecting the world to accommodate every little problem. Sarah screenshot everything, building a case file with the methodical precision of a SWAT operation. But this wasn't just about Chen anymore. The school district had knowingly hired someone with a documented history of abusing disabled children. Her investigation revealed a pattern of negligence that made her blood boil. Complaints buried in bureaucracy, transfers instead of terminations, vulnerable children repeatedly failed by the system meant to protect them. At 2 a.m., Sarah made a decision that would have consequences far beyond one substitute teacher. She began typing an email to the district superintendent, copying the school board, the local media, and the disability rights advocacy groups she'd researched. Her message was professional but devastating. A tactical strike against institutional negligence. The subject line read, "Documented pattern of abuse against disabled students. Immediate action required." In the email, she detailed not only Tommy's assault but the broader pattern of the district's failure to protect vulnerable children. She attached documentation including photos of Tommy's injuries, screenshots of Chen's discriminatory social media posts, and records of previous complaints that had been swept under the rug. But Sarah wasn't finished. Her final paragraph demonstrated why she was one of the department's most effective detectives. As a law enforcement officer specializing in threat assessment and public safety, I am compelled to report that your district's handling of documented abuse against disabled children constitutes a clear and present danger to vulnerable students. I am forwarding this information to the appropriate authorities, including Child Protective Services, the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, and the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges. She hit send at 2:47 a.m. By dawn, Sarah's phone was ringing off the hook. The superintendent's office wanted an immediate meeting. Local news stations had picked up the story. Disability advocacy groups were demanding investigations. Sarah had done what she did best, identified a threat and neutralized it with overwhelming precision. But as she watched Tommy eat breakfast, still moving gingerly and jumping at sudden sounds, she realized this was just the beginning. The system had failed her son and countless others. As a SWAT officer, she knew that sometimes the only way to eliminate a threat was to dismantle the entire operation that enabled it. She was prepared for a long campaign. The district superintendent's emergency board meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. on Thursday, just 3 days after Sarah's digital assault on the school system. She arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in her full dress uniform, a psychological tactic she learned from years of courtroom testimony. Authority commanded respect, and respect opened doors. The conference room buzzed with nervous energy. School board members whispered among themselves while district lawyers shuffled papers with barely concealed panic. Sarah recognized the body language. She had seen it countless times in interrogation rooms when suspects realized their carefully constructed lies were crumbling. Superintendent Williams, a thin man with prematurely gray hair, entered with the defeated posture of someone who knew he was outgunned. Behind him walked Linda Chen, flanked by union representatives and her own attorney. Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her, the same focused clarity that came before high-stakes operations. Chen avoided eye contact, but Sarah could see the woman's hands trembling slightly. Good. Fear was a powerful motivator for truth-telling. Detective Martinez, Superintendent Williams began, "We appreciate your concerns about this incident. However, we believe there may have been some misunderstandings." "There's no misunderstandings," Sarah interrupted smoothly. "Ms. Chen physically assaulted my disabled son. She left documented injuries. She has a history of abusing special needs children that your district ignored when hiring her." The room fell silent. Sarah opened her briefcase, not the standard police-issue case, but a custom tactical organizer that made her appear even more formidable. "I've compiled evidence of a systematic pattern of discrimination and abuse within your district. 17 documented complaints against staff members involving special needs students over the past 2 years. 12 of those complaints were resolved through transfers rather than terminations. 5 of those transferred employees have continued to abuse children at their new schools." She slid a thick folder across the table. Board members leaned forward to examine the contents, their faces growing pale as they absorbed the scope of the documentation. "You've created a pipeline that shuffles predators from school to school rather than protecting vulnerable children." Sarah continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to briefing federal task forces. "In law enforcement, we call this pass the trash. It's a practice that endangers public safety." Linda Chen's attorney spoke up. "My client maintains that she was attempting to assist a student she believed was choking. Your client grabbed an 8-year-old by the throat and shook him while calling his disability a performance." Sarah cut him off. She did this without reading his medical file, which clearly outlined his condition and care requirements. This wasn't assistance. It was assault motivated by prejudice. Sarah pulled out her phone and played a recording. The room listened in uncomfortable silence as Tommy's small voice described the incident, his words halting and fearful. "That's my son explaining what happened to a licensed child psychologist yesterday," Sarah said. "He's now experiencing trauma-related symptoms, including nightmares, regression in his speech patterns, and anxiety around school staff. Ms. Chen didn't just hurt him physically, she damaged his trust in the very people meant to protect him." One board member, Dr. Patricia Reeves, spoke up. "Detective Martinez, what outcome are you seeking here?" Sarah had prepared for this question. In SWAT operations, you always had clear objectives before engaging the target. Ms. Chen will be terminated immediately and reported to the State Education Board for removal of her teaching credentials. The district will implement mandatory training on disability awareness for all staff, with annual recertification requirements. You'll establish an independent oversight committee with disability advocates to review all future complaints. She paused, letting the demands sink in. Additionally, the district will fund a comprehensive audit of special needs programs and provide counseling services for any child who has been subjected to discriminatory treatment. "And if we refuse?" the superintendent asked weakly. Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then I escalate this to federal authorities. The Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights is very interested in systematic discrimination against disabled students. The FBI's Public Corruption Unit handles cases involving institutional abuse of vulnerable populations, and the media is already calling this story a law enforcement officer's fight for justice for her disabled child." She let that sink in before delivering the final blow. "But mostly you'll refuse because you know I'm right. You've failed these children repeatedly, and now you have an opportunity to make it right. I'm offering you a chance to be part of the solution instead of just another defendant in a federal civil rights lawsuit." The room was silent except for the sound of Linda Chen quietly crying. Her attorney was frantically taking notes, clearly calculating the impossibility of defending the indefensible. Dr. Reeves cleared her throat. "I move that we accept Detective Martinez's terms and begin immediate implementation of the requested reforms." "Seconded," came from 3 board members simultaneously. The vote was unanimous. As the meeting concluded, Sarah felt a familiar satisfaction, the same feeling that came after successfully resolving a hostage situation or dismantling a criminal organization. Justice had been served with overwhelming precision. But as she walked to her car, Sarah realized something important had changed. She was no longer just Detective Martinez, SWAT officer. She was also Sarah Martinez, advocate for vulnerable children everywhere. And she was just getting started. 6 months later, Sarah stood at the podium of the state capitol's Education Committee hearing room, her SWAT commendations gleaming on her dress uniform. The room was packed with parents, educators, and disability advocates, all there because of legislation that had started with one mother's refusal to let her son's assault go unanswered. The Tommy Martinez Act, as the media had dubbed it, would require mandatory disability awareness training for all school personnel statewide and establish independent oversight committees in every district. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, her voice carrying the same authoritative calm she used to brief countless tactical operations. 6 months ago, my 8-year-old son was assaulted by a substitute teacher who saw his cerebral palsy as attention-seeking behavior rather than a medical condition requiring accommodation. She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, a photo of Tommy on his first day back to school, smiling nervously but bravely at the camera. Today, Tommy loves school again. His new teacher, Mrs. Patterson, understands his needs and celebrates his achievements. But the changes that made this possible didn't happen by accident. They happened because we refused to accept that vulnerable children should suffer in silence. The presentation that followed was classic Sarah, methodical, data-driven, and devastatingly effective. She detailed how the reforms implemented in Tommy's district had become a model for the state, reducing complaints against staff by 70% and increasing satisfaction among special needs families. "Law enforcement teaches us that the best way to prevent crime is to eliminate the conditions that enable it," Sarah continued. "Educational negligence thrives in environments where discrimination is overlooked, complaints are buried, and problem personnel are shuffled rather than removed." In the audience, she spotted Linda Chen's former supervisor, who had resigned in disgrace when the state investigation revealed a pattern of covering up abuse complaints. Nearby sat Dr. Patricia Reeves, now the interim superintendent, who had become an unexpected ally in implementing reforms. But it was the front row that mattered most. Tommy sat next to Sarah's husband, wearing his best button-down shirt and the adaptive devices that helped him participate fully in school activities. His smile was bright and confident, the smile of a child who knew he was safe and valued. "The question before this committee," Sarah said, building toward her conclusion, "is whether we'll be proactive in protecting our most vulnerable students or whether we'll continue responding only after children have been hurt." She paused, making eye contact with each committee member. As a SWAT officer, I've learned that the most successful operations are the ones that neutralize threats before they can cause harm. This legislation represents the same principle applied to education, identifying and eliminating the systemic vulnerabilities that allow discrimination and abuse to flourish. The committee voted unanimously to advance the bill. After the hearing, Sarah found herself surrounded by parents sharing their own stories, children mistreated, complaints ignored, systems that have failed their most vulnerable students. Each story reinforced her conviction that this work was far from finished. Detective Martinez called a voice from the crowd. Sarah turned to see Maria Santos, whose autistic daughter had been suspended repeatedly for behaviors related to her disability. Because of what you did, they actually listened when I complained about Elena's treatment. She's thriving now in a classroom that understands her needs. Similar testimonials followed throughout the evening. Parents who had felt powerless now had tools to advocate for their children. Educators who wanted to do better now had training and support. Systems that had operated in shadows now faced oversight and accountability. Later that night, as Sarah tucked Tommy into bed, he asked the question that had become their evening ritual. "Did you help other kids today, Mommy?" "I did, baby. And tomorrow I'll help more." "Like how you helped me?" Sarah kissed his forehead, careful not to disturb the communication device that helped him express himself more clearly, one of many accommodations his school now provided without question. "Just like how I helped you." As she turned off his light, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The substitute teacher who had assaulted her son now worked in retail, her teaching credentials permanently revoked. The district that had enabled the abuse now served as a model for inclusive education. The system that had failed vulnerable children now had safeguards and accountability measures that were being replicated across the state. But perhaps the most important change was in Sarah herself. She had discovered that the skills that made her an effective SWAT officer, tactical planning, threat assessment, decisive action, were equally powerful when applied to systemic injustice. Her phone buzzed with a text from a parent in Oregon. "Detective Martinez, saw your story on the news. My daughter with Down syndrome is facing similar treatment at her school. Can you help?" Sarah smiled as she typed her response. She had found her true calling, not just protecting the public as a police officer, but protecting the most vulnerable as an advocate and reformer. The SWAT gear had been metaphorical all along. Her real weapons were knowledge, determination, and the absolute refusal to let anyone harm children who couldn't protect themselves. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new systems to reform, new vulnerable children who needed a champion. Detective Sarah Martinez was ready for all of them.